Argentina didn't just lose a World Cup final. For a lot of people back home, they watched an era die in real time. And nowhere was that grief more visible than in the country's own media, who spent the hours after the final whistle putting into words what an entire nation was feeling as it watched Lionel Messi cry on the biggest stage in football, possibly for the very last time. Let's start with the scene itself, because you need to understand exactly what Argentina's press was reacting to. Spain beat Argentina 1-0 in extra time, with substitute Ferran Torres scoring just 37 seconds into the second period of extra time to break a stalemate that had gone on for 119 minutes. Argentina had come into the tournament as defending champions, chasing something no men's national team had managed in over 6 decades, winning back-to-back World Cups. Instead, they leave with a runners-up medal, a golden generation almost certainly finished, and a squad that, by the numbers, was thoroughly outplayed. Spain outshot them 20 attempts to 2 across the 90 minutes and extra time combined, a gap that tells you everything about how one-sided the football actually was, even in a match that stayed level until the very end. And then there was Messi. Whatever else gets said about this final, the image that's going to define it, at least in Argentina, is Lionel Messi standing on the running track at MetLife Stadium, facing his own fans, tears running down his face, a silver medal around his neck instead of gold. Reporters covering the game noted that this didn't look like anger or bitterness. It looked like the emotion of someone closing a chapter, aware that this was very likely his final World Cup at 39 years old, after a decade and a half of trying to win the one trophy that eluded him for so long, before finally getting it in 2022. He and his teammates didn't stop to speak to reporters as they left the stadium that night. There was nothing left to say out loud yet. The talking, instead, got done the next morning, on the front pages. Clarín, one of Argentina's biggest newspapers, ran a tearful photo of Messi with a simple, forgiving headline, telling readers the team had given everything and there was nothing to blame them for. Olé, the country's dedicated sports daily, went with its own tearful image of Messi and a headline wishing this Argentina generation eternal life in memory, treating the loss less like a defeat and more like a farewell tour reaching its final stop. La Nación struck a similar note, framing the result as painful, but something the country could still be proud of. Every one of the big three ran essentially the same emotional message. This hurt, but there's no anger here, only gratitude for what this group of players built over the last 4 years. TYC Sports, meanwhile, took a slightly different angle, the only outlet willing to actually break down the football itself rather than just the emotion around it. Their post-match analysis singled out 4 Argentina players for particularly rough grades from the final, awarding all 4 scores of 4 out of 10 or worse. Rodrigo de Paul, so influential in the semifinal win over England, was marked down heavily for inaccurate passing and a quiet second half. Enzo Fernandez, sent off late for a second yellow card that left Argentina playing the closing stages a man short, was judged just as harshly, with the outlet noting the effort was there but the composure wasn't. The harshest grade of all went to Nahuel Molina, brought on at right back in the second half, who was singled out as part of a defensive problem down that flank that Scaloni had struggled to solve throughout the tournament, and who was directly involved in the build-up to Spain's winning goal. That's a notably different tone from the Clarín and Olé front pages. On one hand, you've got the big national dailies wrapping the entire squad in a blanket of gratitude and pride, treating this as the emotional end of an era rather than a footballing failure. On the other, you've got the specialist sports channel doing what specialist sports channels do, looking at the actual performance data and telling their audience plainly that several individual performances simply weren't good enough on the biggest stage of all. Grief and analysis running side by side, in real time, across the same media landscape. Then there's Scaloni himself, whose future is arguably the single biggest open question hanging over Argentine football right now. The manager who built this team from the ground up, who delivered a World Cup in 2022 and reached back-to-back finals since, admitted afterward that he hadn't even discussed Messi's international future with him yet. An extraordinary thing to say in the immediate aftermath of a World Cup final, and a sign of just how raw and unprocessed the emotions still were in that dressing room. Ticey Sports and other outlets picked up on Scaloni's own visible emotion at the final whistle, describing him as fighting back tears of his own, and reporting that his own future in the job remains genuinely uncertain, with his contract nearing its end and no clear commitment yet from either side about what comes next. For a manager who's overseen arguably the most successful stretch in Argentine football history, that uncertainty hanging over both him and his captain at the exact same moment gives you a sense of just how much this specific defeat feels like the end of something much bigger than one match. It's worth sitting with why Argentine media reacted this way instead of turning on the team entirely, because that's not always how it goes after a painful final defeat. Part of it is simply who's involved. This is the Messi generation, the group that ended 36 years of World Cup heartache in Qatar, that's delivered Copa America titles, that's given the country its greatest sustained run of success in the sport's history. When that group loses, even in a final, even playing well below their attacking best, there's a national reservoir of goodwill built up over years that softens the blow in the coverage. You saw the exact same instinct in outlets like Olé back in 2014, when Argentina lost another agonizingly close World Cup final to Germany. The same mix of heartbreak and pride, gratitude dressed up as a headline instead of blame. There's also the specific manner of this defeat working for the team's favor narratively. Argentina didn't get blown out. They played a huge chunk of extra time with 10 men after Enzo Fernandez's sending off, and still managed to take Spain, the most informed side of the entire tournament, deep into the second period of extra time before conceding. That's a version of defeat that's much easier for a proud football nation to process and forgive than a heavy one-sided loss would have been. We were beaten by a better team, but we made them work for every second of it. Is a very different story to tell yourself than we were embarrassed on the biggest stage in the world, even if the shot count tells you Spain were dominant for long stretches. And then, of course, there's the brawl, which Argentina's own press has, for the most part, treated with considerably less attention than the football world outside the country has. While Gary Neville, Alan Shearer, and outlets across Europe and North America were calling the post-match scenes disgraceful and unacceptable, and while FIFA was busy appointing a disciplinary prosecutor to investigate Paredes, Molina, and others, the dominant story inside Argentina itself was almost entirely about Messi's tears, Scaloni's uncertain future, and the emotional weight of watching this specific group of players reach the end of the road together. It's a reminder that the same event can generate two almost completely different media narratives depending on which side of the result and which side of the border you're reading it from. So where does Argentina go from here? On the pitch, there are real questions that Ticey Sports already started asking out loud, about that right back spot that gave Scaloni problems all tournament, about whether that Paul and Enzo can still be the engine of this midfield going forward, about who eventually replaces Messi as the emotional and creative center of the national team, whenever that day actually comes. Off the pitch, there's a genuine uncertainty about whether Scaloni himself continues in the job at all, with his contract running out and no update yet on his intentions. And hanging over literally everyone connected to this squad is the open question of what Messi does next, whether Sunday night at MetLife Stadium was really the last time he wears the Argentina shirt at a World Cup, or whether, somehow, there's one more chapter left to write. For now, though, the mood coming out of Argentina isn't anger. It's grief, mixed with genuine pride, mixed with a healthy dose of hard-nosed football analysis running quietly underneath all of it. Clarín and Olé gave the country permission to grieve gently. Ticey Sports gave it permission to ask harder questions about what actually went wrong. Both of those things are true at the same time, and both of them are part of how Argentina is processing what might be the final chapter of its greatest footballing generation.